Today on Locked On Women's Basketball, the Indiana Fever desperately need Caitlin Clark back, but hopefully she'll be back on the court soon.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Chelsea Leite. I am a writer-reporter on The Next, covering everything until the Toronto Tempo start playing anyway. And I'm joined today by Indiana Fever reporter, faithful, Tony East. And we're going to get into a few things, including Caitlin Clark injury updates. Will she play Saturday? Will she won't? We're also going to recap the Indiana Fever versus Atlanta Dream game from yesterday. That was a little rough. Yesterday, the day that we're recording. This is going to go up on Thursday. We're talking Wednesday. And then we're going to look ahead to the New York Liberty versus Indiana Fever game coming up on Saturday. Talk about, what they can do to get back in the winning column. Thanks so much for joining me, Tony. What was your reaction to that fourth quarter last night?
Yeah, it was an interesting game because in the third they were winning, and it was like, oh, this would be a nice win for them. Clive Farr would have been their best Clarkless win so far, but also it was like the dam was about to break. The Dream did not hit a three until the third quarter of that game. Like any second now, this Smesco team that just bombs away over and over and over was eventually going to make one, right? So on one hand, it was kind of this was coming at some point. Like Griner was in foul trouble once she was able to play. Like that was going to open things up. On the other hand, their offense really flopped too, and that was kind of unrelated to what the Dream were doing. And that's kind of something that I think's been fascinating for the Fever all season is they have some stretches where their offense is really flowing and they can get from action to action. And they have some other stretches where they run through their first thing, and if there's no shot, they're like, who are you? Are you my teammate? What do we do now? And they just can't score. And it's very perplexing. And I get that they're very new and working through stuff and they've been injured, but it's 10 games in. Like we're almost a quarter of the way through the season and they haven't quite gotten through that kind of hurdle that they've been dealing with for so long.
Yeah, and I mean, the obvious thing that's been hurting them the most is the fact that Caitlin Clark has not played in over 2 weeks. The latest update came a few days ago. Yesterday, of course, when she didn't play for the Atlanta game. Steph White said on Monday that she had been cleared to start ramping up, but not necessarily cleared for basketball activities. And the whole general idea is that they're not trying to rush her back. And so she's kind of day to day this week as they kind of assess where she is in terms of conditioning, where that injury is at. And I mean, the Fever kind of got lucky in this week in the sense of scheduling because they don't play now until Saturday. So gives Caitlin a few extra days to ramp up, to continue resting that quad, to see if she's going to be able to play on Saturday. But like from your sense, being around the team and like just studying this stuff every day, do you think she's going to be back on Saturday against the Liberty?
I think that would maybe be the hope. I don't know that that's necessarily something they can say for sure right now. I've learned the Steph Whiteism of we're thinking long-term means Caitlin's not playing in the very next game. So we'll see what she says as this week progresses. They practice on Thursday and Friday. Just right place, right time, I guess, to see this. But the Pacers, who are in the NBA Finals, had a practice last week at their facility, and Caitlin was in their gym running on an elliptical, I think, or a treadmill, whatever it was, something. And that was only noteworthy for me because that's the first time I had seen her running at all. Like I'd seen her do a lot of jump shooting after practices and stuff like that. Those videos have circulated like crazy, but that was like, oh, okay. Like that's noteworthy. So basketball activities is obviously one combining those two things into the, there's like contact involved and conditioning and endurance and all sorts. It's not the same, but that was in my own head, a hurdle of like, oh, okay, perhaps this is trending towards a sooner rather than later thing, even though, as you know, from covering sports for forever, reevaluation is not return. So we will see. But I certainly wonder if it's possible, especially with it's a big Commissioner's Cup game. It's a measuring stick deal. They were very close to being the first team to beat the Liberty in Indy earlier this season, right? Like it'd be a big deal if she could come back and they could play well because they in this 2-3 stretch without her, they've played some crummy teams. They were lucky in that way, but still they lost to Washington and Connecticut. They'd like to have those games. So they don't need her. It's not like a rush, like, oh my gosh, we're 4-5, the sky's falling. But I'm sure they would like her to be ready for that game if possible. They just obviously will not rush it. Like, there's no point, and we'll see where things go later this week.
Yeah, I mean, Caitlin said herself that there's no point in rushing it. And the thing about quad injuries, they can be tricky. They can be re-aggravated really quickly. Yes. You never want to, cause long-term damage, especially for someone as young as Clark as well. And you also don't want something lingering, into the playoffs and into the end of the season where these games really matter. So, the if you want to say lucky, like, obviously nobody wants to be injured and we don't want anybody to be injured, but the timing of her injury, both with their schedule and with the overall timing in the season, kind of worked out, because hopefully if you can just make sure she's healthy and then, it doesn't get re-aggravated as the season progresses throughout that. But I mean, when you think about this New York game, like you said, pretty important game measuring stick wise, Commissioner's Cup, if you care about that. And just like the idea of Indiana wanting to reprove themselves as these, high tier contending teams, as we kind of start to separate between the Lynx and the Liberty and kind of everyone else. But so, like, when you think about it in that sense, do you think there's a readjustment period for Clark, or do you think she kind of just like comes back in and everything's back to 100?
Yeah, that'll be a very interesting thing to see, right? I'd be lying if I knew either way, because like last year they had a really terrible schedule to start the season. They were 1-9, and then they went crazy, obviously, to finish the year and got into the playoffs. But I only mentioned that to say, like, part of why I think that happened is playing with Caitlin is very different than a lot of other settings of basketball. And so I think a lot of players have to learn how to play with her. Leah Boston has even talked about this year. That was an adjustment for her to start last season. Different pace, different touches, how all that stuff works. And Aaliyah looks great to start this year. So there's a lot of new players in the Fever. So partially it's an adjustment to playing with her already. They've only done that 4 times, less than half their games. And they had to, like, they can claim that they can play the same way without her right now, but they can't. Like, she's just such a central part of pace and space and shooting that, yeah, they could try to play that way. They have players who fit that style still, but it's different without her in terms of what passes are available, what spacing is there. And they've played through Aaliyah more, and that's gone pretty well. And that Colson has stepped up recently, and Bonner's been great with her out. But it is an adjustment. Like, it's different, right? So I think the Clark minutes will go fine. Like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. But like, when she's on the floor, their offense just wrecks. But it's still an adjustment for everyone. And that's why I think, too, this injury coming early in the year is good for the Fever, because eventually everybody will learn how to play with her, and they'll be rolling better by the end of the year. But yeah, it's not like you just drop her back into the team. They're like, great, we're ready to go. We've been mastering the style while you're out. Like, it's just a lot different and more complex than that for this team with the way that they want to play. And they added players specifically to fit the way that they want to play in the offseason. So maybe it'll go fine. They were within a possession of beating New York earlier this season, but I don't think it'll be like, yep, we're ready to go right away against maybe the best team in the W. Depends how you feel about Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's on, like, I don't want to say poetic because that seems a little dramatic, but like, her last game is against the New York Liberty, and then she could return against the New York Liberty, and you can kind of get a sense of like how she's doing, how the team is doing. I mean, you talk about players having to learn to play with her specifically. Like, what exact characteristics and qualities does Clark bring to a team that makes it so that players have to like adjust to her playing?
I mostly think it's like tempo and pace stuff. It's just so fast. And for Aaliyah specifically, like, she was with the Fever the year before when they played way slower, right? Intentionally slower because of the personnel that they had. So all her habits and things as a pro were like, nope, don't do that anymore. Do this instead. But for any player, like, that is a difference. And the other part is for a lot of players who are already adjusting to, earlier offense and quicker actions and like, keep your head up, be ready for the ball, is basically everyone they added, you could argue, is like down one tier in the pecking order from their team from last year, right? DeWanna Bonner, Natasha Howard, all these players who are terrific were whatever, second, third options on their team last year and are now lower in that order. So that's an adjustment too, of like picking your spots, figuring out where that's all going to come. And Kaylin will get you the ball if you're open and like have an advantageous position to score. But you got to figure out when that's going to come, how the plays all work, when you're going early. And transition's a huge part of it. That's an adjustment for everybody too, because if you run hard, you're going to score, and you got to be ready for it. And then there's a lot of the ball's flying all over the gym and everybody complains about the turnovers, but it's just a big difference for a lot of players, especially when you play on slower paced teams. Even Stephanie White, the coach point guard synergy is a big part of basketball. And like, that's an adjustment for everybody. So yeah, it's just a learning experience. And I think everybody's going through that. And I saw it with Aaliyah last year. She became an all-star as the season went on. Kelsey Mitchell's been better the second month of the season, basically every year of her career. Like, I think it'll click for everybody eventually, but it hasn't to start the year.
Yeah, for sure. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive in specifically to the games that Indiana has played without Caitlin and kind of what they need to do to be able to survive potentially more. So stay tuned. This is Locked On Women's Basketball. There is nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, fans losing their mind, and it's a kind of atmosphere that you must experience live. I mean, we're seeing it right now, and personally, I just remember the 2019 NBA playoffs or the NBA finals between the Toronto Raptors and the Golden State Warriors. One of the best times to be in the city of Toronto, and I mean, any city experiencing an NBA finals is able to experience that, but being able to see it live in person, I can't even imagine because I was not able to. I did not know about Game Time at the moment. So if you want an app that is able to get you deals on NBA playoff games, Game Time is for you. And I mean, you can see the exact view of your seats before you even purchase, so you know exactly what you're getting, and you're able to get incredible deals. So, I mean, in the United States, if you're looking for NFL deals, those games just dropped, and you're able to, again, see exactly where you're sitting, see exactly what the price is, and tickets can be as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts on Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we are back here on Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Chelsea Leite, that's Tony East, and we are talking the Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark, of course. So let's get into, this is airing Thursday, but the last time that the Fever played, even still, was Tuesday. They were at the Atlanta Dream for a game that, 2 weeks ago, people didn't really know if Caitlin Clark would be back. Monday, it was confirmed that she would not play. And the game was interesting because the first half was pretty close. Both teams weren't scoring very much on the perimeter. And then Atlanta just started scoring in the paint, and Indiana couldn't keep up. They took the game in the second half, and it was just kind of one of those things where you're slowly watching it descend into bad. And then it's just like, you can't get out after that. So obviously, like I talked about points in the paint, talked about 3-point shooting. For you specifically, what went wrong in that game that you could pinpoint in terms of what the Fever did to lose kind of their standing as being pretty even throughout the first half?
16 minutes to go. The Fever were winning, which is crazy to say because they lost by 19. There was a dreadful close. And I think the number that Steph White would point to is that they gave up 36 points in the first 26 minutes of the game and 41 in the final 16, right? Their defense evaporated into thin air. And some of that is stuff that we already have like hinted at, or talked about. But, the Dream finished this game. They only made 5 threes. All 5 came in that late stretch. Their transition play was awesome. And that's where I think that the defense numbers really bleed into what the Fever's issue was in this game is they couldn't score. And so the Dream were in transition so much. And, when we've been at practice talking to the Fever players about defensive improvement, like Sydney Colson talked about, like shot selection, better ball movement. Like if you play a better offensive possession, transition defense and defense becomes easier. So they're kind of interconnected. And so in the Fever were scoring well. They only had 37 points through 26 minutes, but they only scored 21 the rest of the way. Their offense only scored 9 points in the third quarter, right? When their offense really evaporated in that game, they couldn't get going. Lexi Hall missed every shot she took. Mitchell missed every 3 she took. Right, they pretty much were a Howard operation in this game. The Dream got in transition. That was killer. The Dream finally made their threes. That was killer. And it just shows for a team like the Fever, especially without their star point guard right now, the interconnected play of offense and defense is really important. Like you have to be very sharp and crisp and intentional all the time. And for a lot of this game, they were. But once that kind of went away, like they had nothing connected on either end of the floor. They weren't able to generate a good shot, so the Dream would score easily. And so they're setting their defense, and the Fever couldn't generate a good shot. And it just kept going and going. Like 13 assists in a game is just never going to cut it. And that just their ball movement wasn't there. So it's on both. If they get more stops, they can get in transition and score easier, but they can't. And if they can't score, they're guarding in transition the whole game. I'm saying the same things over and over again to say a lot went wrong really fast and it was all connected. Like it was just all a mess and they couldn't get out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, do you see, I mean, you cover this team every day, whereas I, just watch it from more of a bird's eye view, but from your perspective, is this team built in a way that they can't succeed unless Clark is not only playing, but playing well?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, like certainly they built a team and a style that is what her strengths are, right? Like that we talked about earlier with pace and space, but to get into it, like she's great in the open floor. We all see the passes all the time. They're clipped every time. You know, you get in the open floor, you got to stop. You force the other team not to score. Yeah. And so that like every player that doesn't, excuse me, fit their offense perfectly that they added this free agency period is a good defender, right? Or can add something on that end of the floor that could get them into transition. And that just wasn't there all the time for them in this game or in a lot of games. And so that's the part that I wondered if they would be able to survive more effectively than past seasons without her on the floor. Because like, even though she played every game last year, she didn't play every minute. Like she was not always on the floor and they struggled in those minutes. But I wonder if their defense would be like the 6th or 7th best. They've been a bottom 2 defense every year for like 7 straight years. Right. And so if it was good enough, could that be enough? And it kind of hasn't been, right? It's been okay, but they need to be a little bit better on the defensive end. And that's why I wondered if they could survive. But like what I asked Stephanie White was like, look, every player you have is a part of your identity. That's why they're on the team, period. But the one who has the ball is the central part of the identity, the setter of how you play. And that is Caitlin Clark. And so you can say what you want about, oh, maybe they'll be better on defense. Like they still have 3 all-stars in Bonner, Mitchell, and Boston playing. Like they should be fine. And if they had snuck out of that Connecticut game, which is a loss that they would love to forget about, they'd have gone 3-2 without her so far and been like, yeah, this is fine. But it's just been clunky and clearly proof that they built their identity around that style that is harder to play without her, right? So that they can do better than this. Like Kelsey Mitchell had 2 better games right before this. Lexi Hall missed all her shots. That never happens, right? Boston was awesome the first half and bad in the second half. It's just how it is. But I think they thought they could maybe be a little bit better, but it's so hard when such a central part of your identity is gone. And for the season, their offensive rating, if I can do math quickly, is 10.5 points worse without Clark on the floor. Like that's a huge loss per 100 possessions. Like that's 11 points a game. So it's a huge thing for them to overcome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with Clark obviously being out, you have to try and make up for her points. But when she's scoring 20, 25, 30 points a game, that 10 points makes a little bit more sense because, you're still counting for like 20 points. That's great. But she just scores so much and she assists so much. She's so good at seeing the floor. She's so good at finding her teammates in difficult situations, the pick and roll, like we can go on and on. So yeah, like I feel like, I think we expected them to be clunky without her. So I don't think, things are too shocking, but it's still just like disappointing to see that, she's not someone who misses that much time with injury, but the idea that they can't recover even after 2 weeks is a little disappointing. Do you think?
Yes and no. I thought it'd go a little better than this, certainly, right? I think they did too. So yes, in that way you have to call it disappointing, but like it's almost like fact finding to me. Like what works without her for lineups when they have, like, she's not going to play 40. They played her 40 minutes in several games last year, and I think that there was a realization at some point they were like, hey, we can't do this. This is not a good idea, even though it's our best way to win. They added Colson with that in mind. So I think they identified they needed to be better without her on the floor anyway, even if she's not hurt. And so in some ways, again, this felt like fact finding. Like if Boston and Mitchell are on the floor, their offense is like good enough right now. Like it's not great, but it's good enough. Boston was hooping in the first half last night. I tweeted hooping in all caps, which I never do unless somebody's truly balling, right? And even with her on-off on offense is terrific. And some of that's playing with Kaylin, but it's like +8 per 100 possessions. She's missed a bunch of games. So I think that they thought they'd be more afloat than this, especially with their schedule being Washington, Connecticut, Atlanta, and I'm forgetting the other team they played. Oh, Chicago, who they just obliterated.
Yeah.
So, I think they thought it'd look a little better than this, certainly, and they figured out who does and doesn't work in these settings. And like Bonner has been great, right? Like they figured out that when Clark's on the bench, Bonner needs to be on the floor. Like that's a good thing to learn. And they figured out Harry Megdal. Hey, maybe they needed a pacier guard out there who they're going to inevitably lose when Clark returns, right? So some things are good to have learned. Obviously, they'd have preferred better results along the way. But yeah, I would say disappointing is a fine word for it because I think everybody expected to do a little bit better than this, though 2-3 isn't terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me think, too, you're talking about trying to adjust in those moments when Caitlin Clark isn't on the floor. You think about, A'ja Wilson and the fact that Vegas can't really do much without her on the floor either.
Nothing. They can't do anything.
Literally. And so she's having to play all these minutes. And, I've said this a lot over the past week is like, it's a 44-game season. It's a longer playoffs. That's going to burn out any person, whether you're A'ja Wilson, Caitlin Clark, whoever. And so the fact that the Fever are having to figure out these ways, whether they figure out a way to keep Aari McDonald, if they figure out, something to be able to survive not just games without her, but minutes and possessions without her. Because when you're playing a team like New York, like the Lynx, you need to be winning every single minute, regardless of who's on the floor, right? Because those games are going to come down to the wire. So, I mean, maybe it worked out in a way that they were forced to have this time without her so they could start figuring out, okay, what's our backup plan? Who on our roster is going to step up in these moments? How can we figure out these minutes that we don't have with her?
And again, like if you said before the season to the Fever, hey, Caitlin's going to have a quad injury, she's going to miss 5, 6, whatever, however many games. When do you want that to happen? They'd be like, yeah, probably pretty early, right? Like, before the All-Star break, probably, right? So in that way, finding this stuff out now, especially like during the absolute softest part of their schedule, both in terms of opponent quality and like frequency of games, that's like a big win, even though it doesn't feel like it for them at the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, seriously. You're so right about the timing. So we're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to look ahead specifically to their Liberty matchup and just kind of figure out how important it'll be for them to kind of start trending upwards in terms of standings, games, wins, etc., as we head into a crucial part of the WNBA season. So stay tuned. This is Locked On Women's Basketball. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped into a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn a space that feels like yours. Comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space. Conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tagged. I mean, I live in the city, and so my small backyard is my oasis. And so, being able to have free, fast, and totally hassle-free delivery in the city to make sure that I'm able to spend as much time outside as possible is so great. And so, being able to go on Wayfair and see everything that's available and just pick the things that are priced in my range and fit my style in, my city backyard is so great. So don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. All right, we are back. This is Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Chelsea Leite. He is Tony East, and we are talking Liberty versus Fever, specifically maybe Caitlin Clark's return game to the Fever lineup after missing almost 3 weeks now with a quad injury. So, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, about this game being very important to the Fever. The New York Liberty are currently undefeated. They are 9-0 right now, kind of inching towards a WNBA record, which is 13-0, set by the Minnesota Lynx in 2016. Maya Moore, Sylvia Fowles, that makes sense. And so this is a game that they certainly have scheduled or circled on their schedule. It's a game Indiana certainly has scheduled or circled on their schedule. And the impact of Indiana being able to break this streak for the Liberty, especially if they break it before Minnesota loses. So they're the first out of those two teams. How much would that boost the Fever, both mentally in the team and the perception of the team by the WNBA universe?
Yeah, I think that I read this. I didn't look this up myself. So if I lie right now, everybody, I'm just regurgitating false information.
Oh.
I think their point differential, the Liberties, is the best ever through 9 games, I believe. Like they actually are off to the best start in W history. They're kicking butt. You know who they didn't kick the butt of? The Fever. They only beat them by 2, and it was like a very dicey, tight finish with some fouls and non-fouls that the Fever hated at the end of that game. It is what it is. I don't think the Fever feel that way, but I think they felt good about where they're playing at that time. Like Kayla didn't even play awesome in that game. She had 10 assists, which was half of the Fever's in that game, but she shot kind of poorly, made 2 of her 11 threes. Like I think if they thought if her or Mitchell had a better game, they could have won it because Boston was awesome. Howard was pretty good defensively. Hall was making shots. Like what they hoped their team would look like in that game. Bonner didn't score either. I think what they hoped their team would look like was that. Like that performance was as close to the Apex Fever as they could have hoped to be, minus a little bit of defense. Jonquel Jones did what she's done to everybody this year and just turned them into dust. But they needed to be better a little bit at the end of that game. I think their clutch woes really popped up. They have a ton of clutch losses in close games this year, but that was like close to them being like, sweet, like we're right there, we're close. We can beat New York if we play just a little bit better than that. It's early in the season. They have running back a championship roster. The Fever look brand new. So it is a measuring stick in that way. Again, especially if Caitlin returns, like, where are they? Are they ready for these kind of games? What do they need to work on? Can Boston be that good again? Because that was her best game of the season, one of her best games ever. And the other subtle part of this, look, I don't know how people feel about the Commissioner's Cup. I'm a dork who loves keeping up with random nonsense. It doesn't matter. They're the top 2 teams in the East right now.
Let's go.
One's 3-0, one's 2-1. The Fever have a lot of point differential work to do, but a win is probably their only chance to catch New York in the Commissioner's Cup standings after they lost to Atlanta earlier this week. So it's a huge game in that way too.
Who doesn't love money? I want to make extra money. They want to make extra money.
If the team you cover wins, you should also be involved in the prize.
Yeah. I agree, honestly. I always say this about like NBA stuff because I cover the Raptors too. I'm like, where's my cut in some of this stuff? But anyway, I think that's interesting as well, just given Courtney Williams, I forget her exact quote, but she's like, I want to win money. This was unrivaled when they were doing the one-on-one tournament. But it motivates players, and maybe that's the thing that the Fever need to be able to beat New York this week and try and make that Commissioner's Cup game, is thinking about the extra paycheck. But it's an intriguing matchup. I mean, the Fever right now are in 7th place in the WNBA standings, which, I mean, I just want to say, first of all, I did power rankings before the season started, and I put the Fever, I want to say 5th, and I got roasted by people. And I was like, sorry, like, whoa, I stand by my choice. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to stay 7th, because obviously, like, they dropped to 7th because Clark is out and there's been close games or whatever, but like feeling a little bit more justified in that sense. But they're 7th right now, which means they're like low playoff contention. And I mean, it's tough. They have a 5-game balance between them and New York and Minnesota. They're, 1 game away from the Storm and the Aces, a game and a half away from Phoenix, 2 games away from Atlanta. So it's tight. And I do have a feeling it's going to continue to be tight over the next few months as well. But we're still pretty early in the season. You said it's about a quarter of the way through. So in your sense, like, where do you see the Fever ending this season? Like, do you think they'll kind of rise above to Lynx Liberty, or do you think they'll kind of fall into that second tier of, just under?
Yeah, they're tricky to evaluate right now because their record is where it is. It deserves to be where it is. They're the 3rd best net rating in the league, right? When they win, they beat the doors off their opponent. When they lose, it's like, so close, scrappy team. Like, you got to do better than that, right? So it's like, where are they? Are they closer to 3rd? Are they closer to 7th? Whatever. Like, I think everybody does, that they will pass the Valkyries in the standings. Yeah. I think they can hold off most, if not all, of the teams below them, right? So can they ascend above, as you've already said, these Dream, Mercury, Storm, Aces grouping and be clearly that 3rd team? I think many thought that was kind of like a reasonable high-end goal for them, is be behind Minnesota and New York. I thought they'd be like in the mix with the Aces certainly in that 3-4 spot, but the Dream are very impressive to me. I think they could certainly end up being that high. Smesco, man, he is that guy can coach. So can they get up that high? Like a lot of these close losses early in the year to Atlanta, to New York, or that's going to hurt their quest to, in the actual win-loss column, get up there. But I think that's what they hope they can be, and have shown at their peak that they're pretty close to. But dropping these games early hurts. So I think that they'll end up somewhere in that 3-6 range. But the higher they get, the better. Especially because if you get to like 3, your playoff opponent in the first round becomes a lot easier, right? So they got to start banking the wins to get there. But I like you was like, yeah, they're probably below that first tier, somewhere in that 3-6 range if you had to power rank them before the season. It's just there's so much newness. You just don't know, even though obviously I think people realized that their peak could be quite high.
Yeah, exactly. And now that we're into the season, I mean, like you said, Atlanta has impressed. Seattle has been rocky, but when they're good, they're good. Like Gabby Williams is career high in most statistics right now. When her, Nneka, and Skylar are all playing at top notch, that team is dangerous as well. And I mean, Phoenix, they're looking really good despite not having Alyssa Thomas for a lot of games. And Kalia Copper hasn't even stepped on the floor yet this season. So, that's something to think about too when you're thinking about, again, these 3-6 range teams. Vegas has looked off, of course. So, who knows if they're going to be able to improve or not. But again, they have the best player in the world in A'ja Wilson, who has just been absolutely storming through the past few years. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I agree. I see them in that second tier below the Lynx and the Liberty. And like you said, it's nice to be up there because then you get home court advantage in the playoffs for a bit. And then you also, and I mean, Indiana home court advantage is very much an advantage, as we've seen, which will be a factor this weekend too, because the game against New York is in Indiana. And then you get to face someone like, if you're third, you're facing right now in 6th, Seattle, possibly someone like the Mystics, the Valkyries, maybe Phoenix, depending on how everything kind of plays out. There's no way
the Valkyries hold this spot, right?
You never know. Like sometimes
they do look way better than I thought. Like way better.
Yeah, they're doing way better. And even Washington is looking way better. Don't get me wrong. I don't think they win a series, but like, I don't want to see Washington in a first round playoff series.
No, they look good.
They look good. They got young people. They got young stars, right? And like, I mean, who knows? Maybe Dallas can kind of like surge. It's early. We'll see. I don't say that with very much enthusiasm in my voice, but it's definitely going to be an interesting playoff series, and they're changing it now so that you go. So it's a 3-game series for the first round, and you're going back and forth so that every team gets a chance to play at home at least once. And so that's a factor too. I mean, travel, home court advantage, stuff like that. So, it's definitely, it's way too early to be talking about playoff positioning right now, but at the end of the day, that's like what we're gunning for. So got to think about it.
You do have to think about it. And it's all close and jumbled and chaotic, and the Aces need to figure out how to guard, and the Fever need to figure out how to guard, and a lot of teams need to figure out how to score. And there's 35 games left somehow.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, the next one for the Fever is coming up Saturday, June 14th at 3 p.m. Big ABC game, big stakes game, Commissioner's Cup and otherwise. And it seems like Caitlin is on track to maybe come back, but also don't like put all of your eggs in that basket of hope. Like don't plan your whole weekend around Caitlin Clark coming back, but also plan your whole weekend around this game because it's going to be good regardless. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Tony. I really appreciate you coming on to talk about the Fever and Caitlin in this wonky week where we're just kind of waiting for her to come back.
It was fun. It's fun to be able to dive into Fever when I've been dying in the NBA Finals, but they've been playing perfectly on my off days, so I haven't missed a beat. It's been fun.
There you go. I've been there, done that. Rest in peace, 2019. I miss you. But yeah, make sure to follow Tony East's work over on the Next. He covers the Indiana Fever beat. So, if you're interested in following that, make sure to catch Tony. And I'm on the social medias, Chelsea Late as well, covering, Canada basketball, national WNBA beat, a little bit of everything. But thanks so much for watching. This is Locked On Women's Basketball. Check us out again tomorrow.